Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are honored to welcome Jean Lee. Jean is an author of Alzheimer's Daughter, as well as a co-founder and manager of AlzAuthors. Welcome, Jean.
Oh, thank you for having me, and thank you for your generosity to AlzAuthors and all things. We certainly appreciate the work that you do.
Oh, it's our pleasure, and I've told Marianne countless times and others from AlzAuthors who have joined us that anytime we can help share the tremendous work that you guys are all doing, we are more than happy and willing to do so. So it's really our pleasure to have you, Jean. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, Jean, let's start with how you got involved, coming from being an elementary school teacher to co-founding and managing AlzAuthors and becoming an author yourself.
Oh, wow. That kind of encapsulates it all. My parents had been very healthy, elderly adults, physically healthy people. And at around age 80, my sister, who lived 1,000 miles away, my sister and I was the hometown girl, noticed a decline. Things were just not quite, they weren't as sharp as they used to be. And we became a bit concerned. We watched that progression for, actually it was 6 years until we got an actual diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease for them. And during that time, my sister, I live in Ohio and she lived in Florida. She had asked me when I would call her, and she was my therapist by phone, I would call her and say these odd things are happening with mom and dad. And she said, Jean, would you keep a journal so that we can open it up and talk about these things together? From that journal, I never realized it would become a book. It started out simply documenting weights and blood pressures when I would take them to the doctor. But as they both progressed and declined hand in hand through the disease, I came to realize that perhaps our story could help others. I had always been an avid reader. I read to solve problems all of my life. So I had read everything I could get my hands on as far as a personal experience with Alzheimer's and dementia. I did not need to know the clinical stuff. I didn't need to know stages, drugs, anything like that. I knew the end game of this, but I needed to know how other people had gotten through this and survived. So after I wrote my book, which was a long process, I ended up reaching out to Marianne Shuko, whose book had guided me through my own journey.
Blue Hydrangeas, right?
Yes. And I ended up mailing her my book because I was so insecure about having published it, so guilt-filled in telling this raw view of what had happened in my family to parents that I so loved. It was very hard to publish this, and I needed validation from someone that I had written something worthwhile, that it was good. I kind of hoped that it would really gather dust and mold in Amazon's basement instead of anyone reading it. But reviewers started to review it kindly. And Marianne, I was reaching for greatness. I thought she'd throw it in the trash. And she read it and reached back out to me and said, this is wonderful. People cannot find these resources. Would you help me gather and elevate these books written from personal experience with Alzheimer's and dementia. So that's how it started. She said, "Who else have you read?" And I said, "Well, I've read Vicki Tapia's Somebody Stole My Iron." And so we reached out to her, myself in Ohio, Marianne in New York, Vicki in Montana. We'd never met. And this became what brought us together with the mission of gathering these books to elevate them for the purpose of providing light to people going through the journey now.
There's nothing that can really prepare you for taking care of someone with dementia.
It scared me. It seemed like there was nobody out there that really understood what I was going through.
I saw my stepfather sitting at the kitchen table. He hadn't shaved, bathed, or changed his clothes in days. He looked horrible. And I said to my mother, "What is going on?" And she said, "Can you help me? I don't know what to do anymore."
There are things that can add light, but there's not a cure.
I think a lot of people stop going to see a loved one. They say, "Oh, they don't know who I am." And I remember going in to see my dad one day, his face just beaming. And he said, "This is the best day of my life." And I knelt down in front of him and he said, "Now, who are you?" And that was really like a punch in the gut, but I kept smiling. And I thought, this is all I can do. But I knew it was my job to just go in and bring smiles to him. That was it.
What we're trying to do is change the story of dementia caregiving from panic to confidence.
I think there's a lot of ideas and strategies and caregiving advice out there, but it's not easy to find.
And when you go into Google and you type in Alzheimer's or dementia caregiving, you're going to come up with millions and millions of hits and not be able to see exactly what you're looking for. But if you go to alzauthors.com, and you're going to find a variety of books on caring for a mother with dementia, caring for your father, caring for your husband or your wife, children's books, blogs, videos, podcasts, all kinds of information, all carefully vetted for you.
Every person that comes into this organization or is touched by this organization helps heal. We help heal one another.
That is partly why I am so passionate about being part of AlzAuthors.
It has provided a sense of community and a sense of perspective.
It gives you hope that you will get through this.
And nobody understands unless you actually walk in those shoes.
So as you embarked on this journey, I can imagine you probably couldn't imagine where it would lead to. And I mean, you now have over, is it 350? And I could be wrong on the numbers, but over 300.
Yeah, I think we're about 340 right now, 340 books and authors. Yes.
Well, and I want to point out for our viewers and listeners who may not be aware of AlzAuthors, and hopefully after watching this, they will become aware. You vet each and every book. This is not just like Amazon. If you write a book, you can post it and it's automatically up there, and that's good or bad information or, misleading information. This is all accurate and handpicked by AlzAuthors.
Right. We read every word of every book, cover to cover. And we may seek out an author that we find in the top 100 in the category of Alzheimer's. But on our website, alzauthors.com, we also have, through our contact us link, authors can submit a book to us. And then there's a lot of personal relationship building that goes into these posts, as I and the others who do acquisitions, we email back and forth with the author, we Zoom with them to get them to know them better, and answer any questions they may have. So we build that relationship before they write their post. And actually we're scheduled full through the end of June of next year already. So we have more people coming to us, more work than we can keep up with, but we love it. And I was just talking to Vicky Tapia, my partner, yesterday, saying every book I read, I find a new friend, a new person. It's deeper than a friendship. Someone who has gone through some part of the same path I did. It's a new brother or a new sister. And I'm reading that book with the intention of, will this help someone else going through the journey? So I love reading these books. I never tire of them.
Well, and it's like you said, it's friendships, it's shared experiences, but it's also a common goal of, like you just mentioned, helping others and saying, will this book be beneficial to someone else? But it's more than books too. It's also, you have a podcast, you have resources, AlzAuthors is so much more than just books. Not that I'm minimizing the book aspect, but it is a tremendous amount of information and resources that people may not be aware of.
So when we started out, we were looking for books, and then we kind of came to the conclusion that a book is written in the aftermath of the journey. And bloggers who were blogging about Alzheimer's and dementia were living it right now. And those voices were very important too. So we feature books and blogs about Alzheimer's. We will ask bloggers, after we research their blog in depth, if they would write an essay for us as well. But then of those, over 300 authors of books or blogs, or we've now begun to bring in films as well.
A podcast.
And we produce a podcast. So out of those over 300 people, we have this wealth of people who want to talk on our podcast.
Right.
So it's like we can't nearly keep up with that, because I think we've got 80 episodes in the books now, but we have over 300 authors who would love to tell more of their story, because you get a glimpse behind the curtain in that 500-word essay, but in a podcast, when you speak to the author, you really hear more of their story.
Well, and that's what is part of the reason you're here with us today, is to share this remarkable love story and journey of your mom and dad, and also your experience of finding yourself as a caregiver for them. Talk a little bit about your parents' bond, because I think that's really special and magical. And, I'm a little bit, oh, you're welcome. I'm a little bit of an idealist. A lot of people, you could say maybe fairly or not, nowadays look at marriage as, is it really that important? I've been married over 16 years, and, it feels like just yesterday, right? But a lot of people don't reach that milestone. Your parents were married for, I want to say, over 60 years.
6 years, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredible. Talk about their bond.
So first of all, I'll show you that this is my book, Alzheimer's Daughter. And the cover, I have to explain it a little bit. In the writing of this book, taking the journal into book form, at the same time that I was cleaning their house out, the house they'd lived in for 40 years, I found this box that I had never seen before in the closet, little gold, like Hallmark card box. And I mean, the house was hoarded. Just to tell you a little bit about their relationship, they were post-Depression, World War II, God and country people. But because of that, they were so frugal, they kept everything, every Cool Whip container, every butter tub lid. And so cleaning that house out was the darkest of the dark times for me. And I came upon this gold box and opened it. And here within it were these envelopes stacked like little tiny files in a tiny file cabinet. And the box had kind of jingled when I opened it up, and it was my dad's dog tags laying on the top. And so I realized these were their love letters from World War World War II, when my dad was in the military. And the next time my sister was home, I showed her the letters. And I mean, by showing her, I showed her the box.
Okay.
And we said, we should not read these. They are private. They were meant to be between mom and dad. We said, we wouldn't really want our kids reading love letters we wrote to our spouses. So we just moved that box with them. And they had 3 progressive moves as they needed more and more care. And we just kept moving the box. And the day after my dad died, we were cleaning out his room finally. And we brought the box home. And honestly, we turned that thing upside down into the trash can because we were dedicated to not reading them. They were private. Yeah. And then my sister said, let's just peek. So we pulled one out, and oh my goodness, they were just like a couple today would text back and forth, filled with gushing love, but also the logistics of, I spent $1.25 on a haircut yesterday, I won $3.50 in the poker game last night. That's going into the fund for our house. And so we put them in order chronologically. And I'm, at the same time, I'm writing the book. And then it came to me that these letters could be the chapter beginnings. And so each chapter begins with one of their letters. And I went on this tangent because on the front cover, these are 2 pennies. And these are 2 of their letters. And that's a picture of my mom and dad when they were newly married. And the pennies are in one letter. My dad writes to my mother, for 2 cents, we could abandon our plans to be married in the summer, and we could get married on a furlough weekend. And she writes back on the same piece of paper. They used every bit of the paper. 2 cents is all you need. And she puts these. Oh. She almost like tears the paper a little bit so these fit in the slots on the paper. And so these are the 2 letters that kind of refer to that. But those letters show something about their bond. And readers have told me that through reviews that I've written a love story instead of a book about Alzheimer's. And so their letters progress from their meeting until they are married and together.
Did they wait? Did they wait, Jean, or did they get married on the furlough?
They got married on the furlough weekend, and it was 10 people in attendance, and my mother did not have a wedding dress. It was just their parents and siblings. And that marriage lasted for 66 years, and they were diagnosed on the same day and declined hand in hand. And so as their letters progress, their physical decline and mental decline progresses in the book.
So they just to jump in real quick. So just curious, did either your mother or your father's parents have an issue with them getting married in that way, or?
No, I don't believe so. That's a great question. I've never really considered that or thought it. I mean, they were both hometown kids. They had not dated in high school, but they stayed together throughout the war.
Nice.
And I think their parents were very supportive of that. In fact, I have the book opens with the first letter my mom wrote to my dad. Could I read it to you?
Yeah, please. I'd love that.
It is, so they've known each other in high school. They actually graduated together. They're small town kids, but they did not date in high school. And my mom does not really realize what she's missing out on with my dad until he leaves. So here's her first letter to him. November 11th, 1941. Dear Ed, I don't know why, but it seems so much easier to tell you in writing how much you mean to me. You know, there isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. In these uncertain times, everyone needs someone to live for, to dream about. Without that, we're lost. Ed, I love you with all my heart. I'd consider it an honor if you'd allow me to wait for you until the war is over. Why couldn't I have realized and told you about my feelings in person before you left for the army? I am so very sure now.
Wow.
Lovingly, Ibby.
What a great memory to have.
So I'm so glad my sister said, let's just peek.
Yeah. 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 So as you're starting to notice some issues and things, what was going through your mind as your parents started to show some signs of decline?
Absolute panic. I lived only a mile from them. My dad was still working in a family business with my husband. My husband could kind of prop him up, but I would get the lowdown from my husband when he came home from work. And my dad was he was a very social person. So his function at this point was shake a hand. I know you, we're friends. And so, there was decline there that I was aware of. My dad was still driving. However, we were in a small town, but people knew to stay away from his car. It was always parked wonky, and they watched for it to go through a red light without stopping. And neighbors started reporting to me that they'd gotten lost. And so what was going through my mind? Absolute panic, because I thought, how do I get my dad to stop working, to stop driving? They were both in the same shape. I mean, my mom never would have said, and to have them both diagnosed on the same day sounds terrible and devastating, and it was, but at the same time, it was a relief because we had known something was wrong. It was relief for me. It was not for them. I mean, my dad was a very peaceful man, but when the doctor delivered that diagnosis, he wanted to stand up and fight him.
Wow.
But the word Alzheimer's was just such a cruel insult in their mind. But absolute panic, because I was working full time. I didn't know how to keep them safe. And my sister and I had vowed to be proactive rather than reactive in all of this, but they'd lived in this community all of their lives. And for them to leave it was going to be, my sister and I became the bad guys. They remained so connected. But I'd stop every day after work to fill their medications, make sure they were taking their medications, had wash bin moved to the dryer, clean up the dirty dishes in the sink, try to. And they just say, oh, we're fine. Just go ahead, go away. Was like, leave us alone, get lost.
So as this is transpiring, because we encounter families, day to day that are dealing with parents and spouses with dementia, all severity, low level, mid level, the late stages. And one story that always sticks out with me, and I'm going to ask you a question with this, is we had one family where, you had a son who was the one that lived thousands of miles away, and the daughter who lived more locally, and she happened to be a teacher also. And we were taking care of her mother, and we kept raising concerns and, trying to point things out to the daughter. And then she would call or stop by, and, mom can have that superficial conversation and, hide it, right? And ultimately what ended up finally convincing the daughter there was an issue is the county came and put a notice on the mother's house that was bought and paid for. She hadn't paid taxes in a very long time, property taxes. So she was at risk for them, taking the property and auctioning it. Were you guys aware of anything like that with your mom and dad? With this, because usually they say a person may have dementia of some form for a while before others really start to take notice and say it's not a sign of normal aging or, just something else. And then it is ultimately dementia. And then they find there's a multitude of financial issues and just a big financial mess. Did you guys encounter any of that with your mom and dad?
Yes. So I'm thinking of things here as you're speaking. First of all, they lived on a little dead end street and their neighbors were so kind to them. So their neighbors watched out for them. I stopped in every day after work. My husband was with my dad every day. So we had those kinds of safeguards in place and eyes on them. But yes, my dad, who had been absolutely financially astute,
Yeah.
I began finding bills tucked in the insides of magazines, unpaid. And so that became very concerning. So, that was then getting him to agree to put me on his checking account so I could write checks for their bills. But so I think we maybe avoided some of that because we did have safeguards in place. But yes, wow. It's something I think about now. My husband was able to get their mail at work and bring it home to me. But now, so much of what we get as far as our bills is through an email or online with passwords. And how does an adult child then come in and really get a full picture of what all of that is? Because I remember spending hours on the phone with a telephone company. They had signed up for numerous phone plans and they were paying hundreds of dollars and never even made a long distance call. And getting all those things disentangled, I think would be even harder now when you don't have physical mail coming to you.
Well, and especially with the, the increase of, these phone scams, people calling and saying I'm from Amazon or your, financial company or whatever the case may be, or the IRS, and they're terrifying seniors who, even ones who are cognitively sound, they're not used to that mindset where people just call you and try to get your financial information. And I do agree. I think, you were fortunate that your husband was able to get the mail and things, but, oftentimes we tell families, just be aware and look for signs because, they could get into serious legal, complications for, financial transactions or lack thereof. And it's hard if you're not a POA or you're not on their financials as a co-signer, you might miss a lot of things because they are able to hide it and kind of keep it tucked away. And it's just, it presents just another obstacle for so many families.
Yes.
Let's talk about your sister, Jean. So it's wonderful. It sounds like you guys were wonderful, compliments to each other, though you were the one locally doing more of the hands-on and in-person stuff. It sounds fortunate that you didn't have that conflict that too often families have with another sibling. Either they don't agree with it or, they'll tell their sister or brother, oh, I think you're just blowing it up. I just talked to mom on the phone and she sounded just fine. We hear those stories all the time. How did you get support, or what was your sister able to do for you to help support your mom and dad and from being, so far away?
My sister had always lived far away and she was 7 years older than I am. And we were the only two children. So we basically grew up almost as only children. We didn't share common interests. And it wasn't until we married and had our families that we had children about the same age. And she remained very connected to our family. She would come home in the summer, or she'd come home for Christmas. I think our relationship in this is not typical at all because it is, I believe, much more typical for siblings to have differences. But my sister, in saying, will you start this journey or this journal? And she had always been very involved. So as my sister encouraged me to start this journal, I would then call my sister every day on my way home from mom and dad's. And my sister was a middle school principal in Florida, so she had a very intense job too. But if I could encourage every long distance caregiver to do what my sister did, she honored me as the local loving caregiver. She wanted me to be able to remain that. And she was very willing to come home with the intention of being the bad guy, which is not easy for a faraway child, because they want to come home and love the parents and be loved. And she would come home with the intention of delivering the bad news that, we're going to have to set a date for moving. And she was my backup every moment. She never questioned my observations. She believed everything. And without that, we would not have had the peaceful relationship we did through this. And my mom and dad raised us to be a peaceful family. We didn't disagree. And I think was part of what made becoming their caregiver so difficult, because that's when we had conflict. They'd given me everything, my sister and I, everything in life. And as we had to start to put restrictions on them, we felt as though we were taking away every shred of everything about them. And that was guilt-filled and heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's difficult. And it's a testament to what a wonderful job your parents did raising your family to, to have that relationship with your sister, who, is also older. And sometimes with having an older sibling, they seem to, be kind of the authority, if you will. And for her to, honor you and respect you in that way is a testament to your parents, but also to you and your sister's relationship.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So let's talk about when you decided to get an official diagnosis. What led up to that? You already mentioned, you guys were seeing some signs and different things, and, your husband working with your dad. When did you decide, and what led you to decide to get that official diagnosis?
So they had an internist for many years who they trusted completely. It just happened. My sister knew that internist personally, and she was able to email him behind the scenes and say, Smart. Things are not right. Jean's bringing them to the doctor. She may not be able to say these things in front of mom and dad, but this is what's really happening. Or she would say, when they come to visit me in Florida, these are my observations. So the doctor was attuned to that. And he suggested to my parents, once again, they trusted him completely, that as they age, he would like to take a team approach to their health care. And he had other members of the team he would like to have them meet. And he thought this would go over really well. And it sounded so good. But my mom and dad, I think they knew. And in fact, my mom said, these were her words, "We don't want to meet with the committee." And, they were like, "No, we are not going to do this. We know they have their suspicions. This is not going to turn out well." So, I had been taking them to their medical appointments for about 6 years. And the morning I arrived, which I had, that each day that led up to this reminded them that we were going to meet other members of their health care team that day. And I arrived and the drapes were drawn and the doors were locked. They would not let me in.
Okay.
And so I remember calling my sister at school and saying, they're not going to let me in. And she called them on the home phone and she said, "Now, Jean has taken the day away from her classroom and you have to go with her." And so they did. And then, they were given a battery of tests, which my mom and dad were such positive people that they really viewed this as playing games with people.
Yeah.
And as we left that first appointment, they were hugging the people who had asked them these questions. Oh, we had so much fun. We can't wait to come back. And so the appointment was in 6 weeks. The next appointment, when we went, they received their diagnosis, and my sister was on speakerphone at that point, and my dad became enraged.
Yeah.
And honestly, the word Alzheimer's was never mentioned again in their presence because it was so hurtful.
Yeah.
But the doctor, we kind of let the doctor be the bad guy. They still had some respect for the medical community, and the journal ended up to be great at that point because I would take the journal in, and the social worker would be reading through the journal to look for decline and frequencies, and that really helped with the diagnosis. But the doctor, when he delivered the diagnosis, he wrote on 3 prescription pads. Prescription number 1, you will stop driving. Prescription number 2, you will have help in your home or you will move to a supportive setting. And prescription number 3, you will give 2 weeks notice at work. And he handed those to us as we left the office, and my parents were devastated, absolutely devastated. But yet the fact that these 3 little things were written on 3 little prescription pad pieces of paper, they gave me backup, as I would say, now remember, this is what we have to do.
Yeah. How did, because this was your father's business too, wasn't it?
Yes.
So I want to get your opinion on this before I ask the question. Being his business, and I feel like, the greatest generation, right? Our World War II era families, and
Yes.
they were self-sustaining, independent, didn't rely on anyone else. They started a family, they started a business. He's continuing to work. Taking away that independence is just, I can't imagine that. When we deal with families, Gene, I always try to put myself in that person's position because, it's one thing, it's very easy and very quick to write something down on paper and off you go and we'll see you in 6 to 8 weeks. But that person leaving with those notes, this is the rest of their life. How did your dad come to terms with this? I mean, I would almost think that it would have set him back rather, I know it's for his safety and his well-being, but at the same time, you also don't want to see somebody regress because of it. How did you guys kind of navigate through that time period? Because I can't imagine what emotionally he must have been feeling.
It was very tough, and he lived within a block of work, so he could still walk and get there to be his social self.
Yeah.
They lived within a block of the restaurant where they ate 2 meals a day, every day. And my sister and I decided, okay, when the weather's bad, you can get in the car and drive to the restaurant, no further. And when it came, and then a neighbor saw them out driving, and I had to start checking the odometer. That was so hard. I would think, we tried having someone come in, a wonderful, wonderful person came in 3 mornings a week, made food for them, helped tidy up. My mother was so offended to have another woman in her house, trying to take care of my mom's husband. She was like, no, this cannot happen. So we knew that was not going to work. We got on a waiting list at a Masonic community, and my dad had been a Mason all of his adult life. And I think because it was Masonic, that was the only reason that my dad finally agreed to go. And this was after like 7 back and forth. Yes, we'll go. No, we won't. Yes, we'll go. No, we won't. And I would talk to one of them privately and then the other one. And my mom had always wanted my dad to retire and he hadn't. And so I'd go at that angle. Dad, mom has waited for you to retire. You're going to join this wonderful senior community with all of these activities. And it's time that you do this for her. And we'd think we'd get both of them on board, then one of them would fall back. And within that waiting period until something became available, it really felt as though we were pushing a boulder up a mountain and it would roll back on us. The morning of the move, we found the community they moved to had this wonderful relationship with an elder moving service that they came in and they helped my mom decide what to take and what would fit in the floor plan. And basically all we needed to do was remove mom and dad from the house that morning. They'd come in and get the stuff to go to the apartment, and they'd set up the apartment. So when we walked in, it kind of looked like their house. But that morning that we left their home, my dad was just so dejected. He couldn't even get out of bed, which was not, I'd never seen him a day in his life like that. I had to help him get dressed and, basically lead him shuffling to the car. And it was heartbreaking, getting him, that triple whammy, driving, working and moving.
Yeah. When you look back, Jean, because albeit for me to say this, but it sounds like you did everything so textbook, like I don't see a single flaw. Now, I say that to ask you though, when you and your sister or you look back, are there any decisions or choices that you made that if you had to do it all over again, knowing what you know now and your involvement with AlzAuthors and, kind of your expertise in the field, if you will, that you would have done differently?
One thing. So we moved to this wonderful Masonic community. And once we got them there, they really did enjoy it. They enjoyed the people. Dad enjoyed visiting there. He had another place to just be a social guy until they declined more, which was rapidly. And we got them in as independent livers, but we absolutely were clear that they both had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, presented the paperwork and everything. And then one of them fell and broke a bone, and we needed more support and help on that, or dental work, or they needed antibiotics or whatever. And I was working, I wasn't there to be able to give them their meds. So they needed assisted living, but this beautiful community at that time only went as far as assisted living. And there was no secure memory care unit. And so as things continued to progress and they became more and more unsafe there, I had to find another place to move them to a secure memory care unit. And that was really hard. It disrupted them again. So one thing I would do differently, I would make sure that the place I was placing my parents had progressive care until the very end, so that they could become acclimated and feel like they were, in the same place, still in their new home.
And I'm glad to hear you say that, because, we encounter so many families who are trying to decide, do we want to have in-home care? Do we want to do assisted living, independent living? And the one thing we always advise them of is make sure you get a very thorough assessment when you go to these facilities, because oftentimes that same family ends up having to call our services, and we're now going to that facility to help take care of that person. Otherwise, they're going to be asked to move out. Make sure you know what you are getting when you decide on the location or the service that you want for your loved one's care, because again, it doesn't make sense to, like at the Masonic community, if they would have told you, and I don't know, maybe they had, after a month, well, your mother, your father, or both of your parents aren't good candidates for this living community, they can stay, but now you have to hire outside help to now also come in and take care of them. So now you're paying for to services, and families that's one of the things I feel like gets so overlooked because everybody's trying to make the right and best decision for their loved ones with all good intentions, and they're all made with good intentions, but sometimes they're made very hastily and uneducated, and it's not the family's fault. And sadly, a lot of these facilities, it's kind of like going to buy a car. They want to get that customer, they want to get that resident, and it's happened so many times. It's just really staggering to think back and look at all the families we've had to help who went into assisted living. And really, when we did the assessment or the evaluation, that person was not a candidate for assisted living whatsoever. And so I love to hear you say that. Make sure they have progressive care so that as your needs increase or change, they can still support those changes where they're at. Because it is very, very upsetting for these, individuals, especially when you're dealing with dementia or an Alzheimer's, having to move and get somewhat adjusted in one community, and now you're being uprooted and doing it all over again. And it's challenging not only for the families, but especially on their loved ones.
I think in hindsight, we could only get my parents to move to this community because it was Masonic. So that was a good step. And I applaud them for being honest enough with me to say, over time, this is not working. And we did end up doing what you said, Lance. We ended up bringing in home health care to try to still support them there. And once again, my mom became so territorial. I mean, my mom and dad would actually go and hide.
Oh, jeez.
They'd leave the apartment and they'd go somewhere and hide from the caregiver.
Wow.
So that was not working out. And they gave me good options of where to move them. But fortunately, now this beautiful community does have a memory care unit. They've built one. And so other families will not have to go through what we did as far as moving a loved one.
That's wonderful. Jean, when did you decide you needed to write this book?
Thank you for asking that. So, given that I felt so torn up about doing it, that is a great question, because people will think, well, then why did you? But just a week after my mom had died, I was sitting with my dad for a visit, and he said, "Where is that woman I admired?" And he knew he was missing the other half of himself, but he could not remember her. And I was astounded as I sat there. I thought, this cannot be happening. And it was at that point that it all clicked for me. This journal that I've been keeping, this journey that I've been on, could help other people who are going through the traveling the same path. But before that even really dawned on me, it was, I need to document this for my own family. And so I began writing Alzheimer's Daughter just for my children and my sister's children, thinking they needed to know our family history. And I wanted to write it well. So I joined a local writing group, and they got a hold of the manuscript and they said, no, this has a larger scope than your family, and we're going to help you make it a book. And so 4 years after I started writing it, they really had helped me and encouraged me to push the publish button. And I honestly, this sounds corny. You'll think I'm making this up, but I'm not. I thought as my finger pressed that last button to officially publish it, I thought I would be struck by lightning and die.
I can understand that. Yeah.
Because my parents were such private people.
Right.
And I thought they would be so displeased to have people know these things. And then once positive reviews started coming in and I connected with Marianne and Vicki, I think we all feel as AlzAuthors that we heal one another by valuing the bravery that it takes to publish something so intimate. And our mission then is to heal others who are on the path, to provide them the light that they need to get up in the morning, put their feet on the floor, march, keep breathing, go to work, whatever they have to do, and you will survive. So through AlzAuthors, I have been healed, and I feel as though we heal others.
Yeah, and I think you absolutely do. When you were researching this before AlzAuthors, before the book Alzheimer's Daughter, what book did you read that gave you any sort of support or comfort or that light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak?
Honestly, it was Marianne Shuko's Blue Hydrangeas and Vicky Tapia's Somebody Stole My Iron. And that was, this was in 2006. So it was at the very beginning of e-readers. And we talk about how we were all on our separate journeys, but we would search like 500 books deep on Amazon for somebody who was telling a personal story, not a clinical one. We download it, devour it in the hours late at night after everybody else was asleep, finish it and start digging for the next one. Those stories sustained us, even though none was identical to our own. It was, okay, somebody else has gone through this journey and they've survived it and they're whole afterward.
Well, and so my point with that question is, you read Marianne and Vicky's books and you reached out to Marianne because her book provided you with that support and that feeling of there's a light at the end of the tunnel. How many people have reached out to you after you're reading your book? Approximately.
Well, I would say that through AlzAuthors, every book we bring in, is someone who reaches out to us as an organization and personally. Many of them have read our books when they come in, and reviewers, I feel, reach out personally to say thank you.
So you've accomplished what you set out to do, right? You're providing people with what Marianne and Vicky provided you. And so, and what I think, I don't know if beautiful is the right way to describe it, but what I would take great comfort in is knowing that I am keeping my parents' memory alive, but at the same time, I'm helping someone else who was me, 15, 16 years ago. And you're giving them that path and that light to say, it's going to be up and down. It's going to be good. It's going to be bad. It's going to be happy and sad. But at the end, you're going to have this beautiful memory of your loved ones that you were there for when they needed you. And you might inspire the next Alzheimer's Daughter writer or author. Right?
I think so. Lance, just this week, I was able to present a custom caregiver collection, which thank you for having one. So at AlzAuthors now, it has become our goal to put real books in the hands of real people in real places. And I took a 20-book collection to the Masonic community where my mom and dad first started. And I talked with a support group there comprised of spouse caregivers. And I packed that thing full of our spouse caregiver books. And I told them my story, the story of how AlzAuthors began and what we have to offer as far as healing. And as I left, the person who had invited me said, Jean, you honor your parents by doing this work.
Yeah.
And that was the furthest thing from what I thought publishing this book would do, would honor them. I was so afraid to do that, but it's so that comment meant everything to me.
Well, and I will share with you. You mentioned AlzAuthors was gracious and donated to our company a custom caregiver collection. And we recently met with a family where it was a daughter and a son whose parents both were just diagnosed with dementia, and the daughter was having a very difficult time with it. and yours was the book that we had given her. And I'm anxious. She's got a lot on her plate, of course, right now, but she's going to be reading it, and I'm hoping I can connect the two of you once she finishes the
I'd love to. I'd love to.
I just want to finish this up with, towards the end of Mom and Dad, Mom preceded Dad in passing. Do you have any memories or conversations you were able to have with your mom and dad before passing? And did you end up using hospice care or palliative care at the end? And if you want to share how that process was.
We brought in hospice for both of them, and hospice was amazing because they gave us a 48-hour window in which I was able to get my sister here, and we held hands, my sister and my mom and I, as she breathed her last breath, and the same with my dad a year later. And that's just such a beautiful memory for me and for my sister. But as far as conversations, my parents were very faith-filled and spiritual people. And when my mom died, my dad had been with her and with my sister and I, and then he became too confused. He is this my mother? Who is this? And so we took him back to his room. The hospice was in the same facility, fortunately. And when I went to tell him that she had passed, honestly, Lance, it was such a relief to me when she passed. I strode down the hall to his room. She's finally free. And I walked in and I said, Dad, Mom has gone to heaven. And he said, she was just here with me, and she told me she'd wait for me there.
Wow.
And there were times during that year that I would walk him around in his wheelchair, push him in his wheelchair. We'd go past a window and he'd stop and wave at the clouds and say, I'll be there soon. And I mean, just those things were so inspiring to me. And even at the end, when he did not know me, and people think, oh, I just can't go anymore. They don't know me. This is too hard. And I thought, well, I've got to go. All I can do is take smiles.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter anything else, just that someone is smiling and beaming at him. And he had been so busy working all the years of our growing up that he was Dad, but he wasn't, we were so much closer to Mom.
Yeah.
But in that last year, he found beauty and taught me to find beauty in the simplest of things, like sweet smelling hand lotion that I'd rub on his hand, or McDonald's ice cream. Those things that we take for granted every day. How many times a day do I put hand lotion on my hands? And it means nothing. But for him, it was, oh, this is so beautiful. And I mean, he really taught me at a time when people would think he has nothing left. He is nothing. He doesn't know anyone. He taught me the essence of positive life. Two of his favorite sayings were, live with an attitude of gratitude, and every ordinary day is extraordinary. And I carry those with me as not just words and sayings, but something that really has meaning that they taught me.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful, Jean. And this is such a remarkable story. And I encourage all of our viewers and listeners to get a copy of the book, Alzheimer's Daughter. We're going to have the links to everything in our show notes and up on the screen as well. The last question I want to leave you with is, what was your sister's feedback the first time she read the book?
She read all along. For me.
Okay.
He would read drafts for me. But honestly, when it came time to publish it, she was quite held back. It was like, I don't know. And I don't think it was because she didn't want me to publish it, but I think she was afraid for me because she knew how vulnerable I was and how much guilt I felt in writing it and publishing it. And I think she thought, I hope this goes well for Jean. And it has. And so she was not opposed to publishing it, but I think she has always been very protective of me, her little sis. And it was in that role that she thought, I hope this goes well. And she's so proud of it now.
Oh, I can't even imagine. And it's just remarkable. And the work you're doing with AlzAuthors and just the advocacy. I encourage everybody, even if you don't have a loved one right now with dementia or Alzheimer's, you most likely do know somebody, though, that has been touched by it. Support AlzAuthors, follow them on Instagram, Facebook, all the social media, the website, alzauthors.com. We'll have all of this in our show notes. And Jean, it's just been an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to become friends with you and AlzAuthors. And we just always say we cannot commend the work you guys do enough. And thank you so much for all you're doing for the Alzheimer's community.
Thank you for including me, Lance. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your viewers.
Anytime. Thank you so much, Jean.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We would also like to thank Jean Lee for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters, and we invite you to visit alzauthors.com for resources, podcasts, and books on dementia. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.